Welcome to our session here at 10:15 this morning, titled Leaving the Stage, Learning and Teaching in the Digital Age. My name is Duane Sider, and I'm associated with a company called Rosetta Stone. We have a stand downstairs, but we can talk about that later. We're not here to talk about the stand necessarily. Just briefly, I obviously come from the United States, where the company is headquartered, and prior to coming to Rosetta Stone in 1997, I was a university prof for about 14 years. As you'll see as we get going here, working in the digital age has been something for an adjustment for an old geezer like me. But having come from a university environment and then having worked in a company that really is a cutting-edge tech company has led me to explore some of the questions that we'll be working with today here about how we go about learning and teaching in the digital age. Now, I want to start over here in 1440. You might say that Erasmus was one of the very first educators to take advantage of a new technology and apply it to the purposes of education. And so thus we start with the printing press and Erasmus. Some of you certainly remember these. What do we have here? These are these reel-to-reel films that we used to show in class. Some of them, I expect, are still in some of our schools here and there. And after that, you're certainly now getting familiar with the language labs, the audio labs that we use for a variety of purposes. And beyond that, those great big boxy video recorders. And all of the techniques and technologies that were associated with television and video in the early days, finally bringing us to the computer, which still doesn't quite get us to the digital age. But I'd nonetheless like to stop at this point and to suggest that continuing from the book forward, all of the way through the early days of computers and really the early days of the internet, there was a particular kind of approach to teaching and learning that persisted all across those 500 and, what did we say, 70 years. Maybe 560 years, because we probably don't want to include this last decade in this characterization of the learning style. And you might simply refer to that particular approach to teaching as the teacher as the sage. In other words, the model of teaching that has persisted for all of these years, and I own as a teacher that it very much would have characterized my own approach to teaching until some of my students just told me to wise up and think a little bit differently about teaching, was that the teacher is regarded as the expert. The teacher is regarded as the source of information and the judge of information, and his or her responsibility as the sage in the room is to make sure that what he or she has learned through their research, through their study, through their publications, through their reading, all of the benefit of wisdom of the ages that applies to their particular area of interest, their topic, is communicated effectively to their students so that their students can grow up to be experts like they are. Now, you might be surprised that I would apply this characterization to all of these technologies that we saw developing in the 20th century. Is that still the case? Well, yes it is. The internet initially was used in education to make sure that the expertise of the ages was now available online, but it was still the expertise that was being presented online. Andrew Keen is perhaps the sharpest critic of things that have happened subsequent to that age, and he simply goes so far as to say that with the innovation of Web 2.0 and digital technologies and social media, that we now simply have the monkeys running the web, is what he said. Day to day, what are some of the things that would characterize how a digital native goes about his or her life? Anybody want to suggest something? Yeah. There you go. Multitasking. Which means, for those of us that don't understand what multitasking is, what does that mean? Gifted at doing a number of things at the same time. Do you see what's actually happening here? So, I actually called Julian before I came to Germany just to confirm with him. He remembers me taking this picture. And I said, you realize that you've only got one earbud in here. And I said, why is that? He said, you know why that is. Because I want to use the phone in my hand in my other ear. It doesn't mean I'm going to shut off the music, but I want to talk at the same time. So he's got his little calculator here, he's got his iPod, he's got his phone, he's got his computer going, surfing a number of different sites for a variety of information. So when we think of digital natives, a couple of things characterize them. One, yes, this idea of multitasking, doing a number of things at the same time. They are preoccupied with bits of information, very quickly scanning and snipping bits of information that they very quickly then circulate with other learners like themselves who are online through a variety of techniques. So, digital natives, bits of information, fascinated with the technology. They have grown up with the technology. A 2-year-old digital native can show you how to use an iPhone. A 6-year-old digital native can text you on that iPhone. Technology is a part of their life, and everything they do, from the messages that they circulate, to the communication that they do, to the images that are becoming increasingly important to digital natives. They are as much visual learners as they are text learners, is driven by the technologies that they have grown up with, and the technologies that in some respects are a little bit unfamiliar to us. So let's just take a little bit of an idea, a look at what Julian is doing as a digital native, okay? The question is, what happens when a digital native encounters the sage on the stage, who is more than likely, like me, a digital immigrant? I mean, typically when you think of the environment in most classrooms, it asks these busy digital natives to sit in a chair. Well, I mean, look at what we're doing here, aren't we? I'm in front and you guys are all sitting down. So this is a typical classroom, isn't it? Sit in rows, be quiet. Think of the average library and how practically none of these things is possible in a library which wants to deprive you of food, to deprive you of drink, to deprive you of air. No, I didn't say that. To deprive you of talking to anybody, to deprive you of making noises out loud, of scuffling your chair. I mean, this was my library. I'm sure that libraries have changed since the time that I was in one of those things. But nonetheless, here's the issue that we want to explore. How is it possible that the wisdom of the ages, or the expertise of the ages, can meet with the quote-unquote expertise of the digital native to create a collaborative learning environment as we move forward? Well, let's look first then at some of the learning that is actually happening in the digital native and how those things take place. So, same image, but here rather than describing the tools that he's using and the activities that he is involved in, let's look a little bit at some of how the learning process is going. So there are a couple of things that the digital native brings, and chief among those are his or her technology skills. One of the realizations that we've come to in the digital age is that perhaps for the first time, the technologies are shaping the pedagogy. In other words, it is the technologies that are making a certain kind of learning possible in a way that it wouldn't have been possible before. So what is that technology and how is it working? What are the digital native's technology skills?